So
Oops.
wants to.
Okay. It's already going live. I just put speaks exclamation mark. Oh my god.
Oh, it's funny.
Here we are. Okay. I'm giving you the link.
All right. Invite the world.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to our live. This is Wyra Forster with Sociedad Podcast Ahimsa. And we are interviewing today, uh, Reivin Johnson, Reivin Alexandria of Sublimatorium. And in just a moment, as Raven's getting ready in the green room, we will welcome her onto the stage. The other, yeah, well, she's um, there. Okay, so I'm in space, and um, I wanted to take a journey to Earth, just like in a TikTok video, and talk to you about um, I wanted to talk to you, but instead I came upon Raven Johnson, and I was intrigued and wanted to interview them, and just thought, wow, this being um, knows so much about like bhakti and more and all different types of yoga, and there's so much to be discovered, and my part not being from not tradition necessarily, but of being a learner. So let's welcome Raven.
Hello.
Hi, Raven.
Hi. Hi, Krishna.
Hi-
How
Hare Krishna.
Hi, Krishna.
So, just for a quick bio, Raven is in Dallas, Texas currently,
I am
out
in
of the out of the turmoil that's happened with the natural disaster. But um, so that's great, and you're joining us this evening. Um, Today we're going to be speaking about ahimsa. Um, and I noticed that you have a lot set up too in your background, like tarot. So definitely we'll touch on that, and talk about, like you said, advertise eclecticism. I'd like to learn more about what that means, because I think that I've been as an interviewer just learning different traditions, and I'm fairly sure that's what that it refers to. So especially just being a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual even person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you want to say just a few words about yourself?
Yes, I do. So again, my name is Reivin Alexandria. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I also use they and them. And my introduction to mysticism and esotericism and all of this began when I was a little kid. So I've always, been interested in studying different types of thoughts and schools of philosophy and spirituality and religions and cultures. And then I went to Oberlin College in 2011. I grew up in southern Louisiana, and I got a $250,000 scholarship from Questbridge Scholars to go to Oberlin College. Sorry, I graduated in 2007. And so I from high school, and then
Wow.
from high school 2007 up until 2011, that's when I went to Oberlin. Yeah, I was salutatorian, drama kid, GT kid, witch. I grew up in, like the 90s, early 2000s. So eclecticism was pretty much my culture. And I remember when I was a kid, I was like, I had this book on gods, goddesses, and monsters, from all over the world, from the book fair, Scholastic Book Fair. A lot of millennials talk about that. And
Yes, yeah, like the book orders and yeah, with Arthur and all those PBS characters, and that's what you're referring to, I think. Yeah, that's so amazing.
yeah, I grew up in like a really small town, so we didn't have internet. And at first, whenever I was a kid, so I really didn't have a way other than through Mardi Gras, because I grew up in southern Louisiana, to get accustomed, really to kind of living in a sort of different, like different cultures, because Mardi Gras is historically, traditionally an eclectic mix of cultures. So I always appreciated the idea of gods, goddesses, and different beings and fairies and stuff like that because of growing up in southern Louisiana. And then, but when I read books and when I watched TV, I was just always into the idea of eclecticism and different cultures like that. So that took me to Oberlin College and graduated in 2011. Then I moved to Dallas, Texas, and became an occupier in the beginning, or during the Arab Spring.
Woo!
Occupy. That's, yeah, you have to say it like that. But yeah, I joke. But yeah, Arab Spring happened, and sprung the Occupy Wall Street movement. And then I had just graduated from Oberlin College with my degree in African Diasporic Studies, Gender, Sexuality, Feminist Studies, and Comparative American Studies. But that had begun as a neuroscience degree. But
That's
I was,
so amazing.
yeah, like I really was kind of thinking the neuroscience department was too dry because they didn't really talk about where consciousness came from like I wanted to, but I also wanted to mainly focus on my African heritage when I was in college, because Oberlin is well known for being a school about queer rights, women's rights, African diasporic people's rights, indigenous rights, though everything. It's like a hub, and it always has been. It was the first school to admit women and Black women and women of color to get their
Yeah.
degree, and it was on the Underground Railroad. So as I was studying neuroscience, I just started to see some of the issues in certain departments when I was there, when it came to them not understanding cultural diversity. Remember, the terms are a lot of the terms that we use now in mainstream activist culture, identity movement, really were getting their ground like strongly held during that time in like the early 2000s, to lead up to a lot of people becoming the Great Recession, right around the Great Recession. So I was in school during the Great Recession, and I just remember really being like, we got to spark this diversity movement. We got to do this trans rights, queer, everything. And we just had a great time doing it. And we honored all of the people who came before us. And it was really fun. And so I graduated from Oberlin College and I moved to Dallas. And then that's when I did Occupy. And then I met the Hare Krishna devotees at Occupy Dallas. And it just really, because I was at a point in my life where I was trying to be personal and political, living it out in the streets, choosing to not have a steady home and just living with tents and making friends and protesting and making art and learning through that type of experience. And so then I met the Hare Krishnas, who showed me to go deeper into indigenous identity and spiritual identity and what that really means, and to decolonize all the way from the roots of seeing how everything comes together, in like a vein
Uh-huh.
of eclecticism. And it just all would reinforce like my study of African diasporic studies, and my because I also have an interest in the sources of European culture and those types of spirituality, because I was raised Christian. And so all of that has deeply informed eclecticism for me. So that's just like a background. And since then I found some gurus since 2011, several different gurus and teachers, and I do daily practices and stuff like that to as a student and disciple, chela type thing.
Wow. I see. No, I mean, we all have these sort of working parts to ourselves as devotees. And, you can say, like, oh, well, religion is for, for like sheep people, but it's, it, being a tool, which we've talked about in a previous episode. It's like taking that religion aspect and realizing more deep within yourself is practically like an idea of ahimsa, in terms of, I think, the first limb of yoga. And by the Patanjali and school of thinking. It's very complicated, because I think anyone who goes into Krishna consciousness with Bhakti Yoga, specifically with the Bhaktivedanta school and the book trust, will come to it with from a different line in their reading, of his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada. So um I want to ask you also, just with this background, it's not like you were having, like a change of trajectory in your life necessarily, as much as it was sort of I don't know, not an intervention, but it was it was like a revelatory moment, arguably, with realizing, okay, I'm in this Occupy movement. I'm in this. I'm conscious of all these world happenings on Earth, but how can I go deeper in terms of spirit? So that I can be healthy. Be keep friends. All these things, have mental health that require sustaining our anyway. I hear a lot of that, our well-being, and I hear a lot of that in what you're speaking on right now. um so actually that just answers, like, right off the bat, two questions that I'd proposed for our interview. um but what do you believe afterwards, that someone, outside of yourself, another entity, maybe, who's related to you in some way? It could even be like a plant, or um, the water, another entity. How do you think that, about consciousness, in terms of like transmutating your, or sharing consciousness with these beings on a personal, or uh on a deep level? Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And first of all, like, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Like, this is like one of the best things I've ever done, I think, as far as like interviews. And I've done a lot. And it's like, this is really great. And so I just wanted to first like say, just like, thank you to my gurus. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Oh my God, Tivanandasya, Ginanjala Salakia, Chakra, Milatamia, Tesme, Shikudavena Maha, Om Kuvinjalisha, Bhaktivedanta Kripa, Krishna Visita Vagyogam Panavavartanyona Maha. So thank you, Kavinda Rishi, as well, who is a disciple of Prabhupada, and so many other great teachers that we all are basically learning from. And so that is kind of like the background of understanding how things are all connected. And that's the guru vibration, the guru frequency, helping us take apart the goo. And so, whenever you talk about a sentient being, what do you define sentient as? Tell me, what do you think sentient means?
It's more than an organism. But I mean, sentient, I always think, oh, like sentimental. Like there was that song, like "Sentimental Woman" or whatever, from the '60s, I think, or '70s. And so it's like in like they are capable of vibrations, or of and basically, in terms of them being capable of vibrations, the beings are, I mean, they could be capable of fear, but more than that, greater than that, they're capable of love. That's what a sentient being is to me.
Yes. Like, I really love that definition of sentience, because you're right. Sentience has a similar root in it as sentimental. And whenever I think of the term sentimental, I go, "Oh, sentimental, like I'm so sentimental." It makes you feel your heart chakra, right? And you're just sort of like, "Oh, sentimental." So a sentient being has a heart chakra. What else might a sentient being have? It might have a system of chakras, right? Because we think of beings that are sentient and they have senses. That's another word that's in sentient. Senses. And so, yeah, isn't that cool? So pretty much how the Bhagavad Gita, defines, if we refer to it within this bhakti paradigm, which I am here to tell you matches a lot of paradigms. Like, the bhakti paradigm is within everything. It is the vibrating nature of love. And so if we think how, all sentient beings, just from our heart, we can feel that everything is connected. That is a part of developing, the ability to see sentience all around you and to awaken your senses and to use them properly, not to necessarily reject the world or the material, but you have to use your senses in a way that you're going to use them through your dharma, like you were saying, like a tool. And so the way to do that is through controlling your mind. And so that's why the Yoga Sutras and Patanjali system is really important. And whenever you study the tarot, for example, you learn whenever you study it with a school of esoteric knowledge or Gnosticism or Hermetic philosophy, whenever you go to the roots of the tarot, it basically is a tree of life. Have you ever heard of the tree of life?
I've I've seen, different projections of trees as life giving. I think in my truthful consciousness, though, I think I mix up the tree of life with like the book of life, as a term. Can you expand on the tree of life, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Odubam Lam Dashakam Ashvatam Trahor Avyam Chandamsi Yasya Paranani Yastam Vedas Vedavid. So this is chapter 15, and it's referring to the idea of a banyan tree, that has branches going up and down. And you even, so you have that tree archetype, that's called an archetype. And and then you also have the tree of life in, the Bible and things like that. And we could go on and on about the symbol of a tree. But whenever I started to study the tarot, I noticed that a lot of the discussion of the tree was also connected to the Hermetic Kabbalah. And so the Hermetic Kabbalah talks about a tree as well. And that tree has different spheres on it. And it's on the priestess card. I don't have the priestess card. That would have been crazy if I would have just like looked. Like, oh
But
God.
if our listeners Google search or search on their DuckDuckGo, trying to promote better search engines,
But
priestess or major arcana, they'll find it.
yeah, so there's two pillars. There's the black and the white. So the tree of life, it sits within that. It's on a lot of different popular shows too. So look that
Okay.
up. And so really that tree of life, and if you read a book called The Garden of Pomegranates, it describes, how this is somewhat like a net or like ladders or like that it's cast and you can cast it. The idea of
What?
casting. And
My bad.
so whenever you become a magician or whenever you start practicing tarot, it's just not that you're just flipping cards, but you learn the tree of life. Like literally, it's like kind of a cliche in some people's minds because the Bible kind of like talks about it so much. We're like Adam and Eve, we get it, we get it, we get it. But you really go into what that means, and you see that the tree of life is a metaphor. And it wasn't really until like I started getting into Vedanta more and I met my guru, and he described, or one of my gurus, and he described that the tree of life is, or sorry, he described that metaphors are the realm of the devas. And it's not that metaphors aren't real, but metaphors are just another plane of existence and they manifest as poetry. And all this makes sense if, as you study different aspects or different branches. There we go, branches. There's a
There you
metaphor.
go.
And so this is why I study the tree of life in Hermetic Kabbalah, because it it kind of gets me to the root of where kind of our modern way of eclecticism comes from. And I think that's really what the Bible is trying to teach us. It's trying to get us to the root of the tree of life, and that has a historical place. And so whenever we have these figures, whether they're Krishna as an avatar, or if you go into the history of the Bible and other books and other stories and narratives, there's these figures, and they're compiling it, and this stuff's not just coming from nowhere. It's just not coming from our idea of what, like a false imagination or a myth. It was based in some history, but they also simultaneously would use allegories and stuff like that. And so whenever you study the tree of life, and you don't only study it with your one half of your being, where it's like you're just looking at the logic of it and you're study, and you're not doing. I think there's a question we talked about that, like the idea of like imagination and action. you study it and you observe it like a gyani, or a, you're just using your third eye, and you're all like a scientists, they use a form of discernment, which whenever you follow the yoga sutras and you have a guru, and you develop a practice around sadhana, then it's like jnana yoga. But in science is trying to get at that,
Yeah.
and but it's the third eye, and so you see it, we have the subjective versus the objective. And so you're asking, like, how can we do tarot readings for sentient beings? It's because
Yeah.
the tarot is just a leaf, like a tarot card is just a leaf, and it's on a tree of life that is basically connected to the planets. And the Vedas is describing this net of cause and effect, and that's called karma. And so the ancient tarot readers and the people who had the tarot is really cool. It's kind of like the first internet's like a similar thing. It's similar to how the tarot works. It's called a net. I call it a net. Some people call it a garden of pomegranates. It's called Indra's net sometimes, but it's like you can see it. I have like ability through sonar. Kind of, it looks like sonar, like a bat. Kind of can like see with sound, and so that's why the vibrations are important. That's why someone who's practicing tarot should chant mantras and should use that experiential direct. So we're going from the just being like, I'm just going to observe, but you're actually chanting the mantras that go with that to enliven it. And it's just not like a artificial observing, where you're not combining the element of fire with however you obtain the senses, however your form is of the card, but you're also doing the akashic vibration, and you're using your arms, you're using your legs. These are all senses. And the Vedas describes not just seeing, nose, mouth, tasting, hearing, but you have karma indriyas, which are the active senses, creating the karma, like the walking around and all that. And you have the perceptive senses, and this is how you experience through the senses, right? Like the perception, the jnana indriyas. And so this is what Ashtanga yoga, this is why we're building a relationship with the eight limbs of yoga, is so that so whenever they had this, they would be able to look at this card, and it's just, just like a representation, and it's like a portal, and it takes you into a path. And so that's why the tree of life has paths. They're represented by the tarot cards. And this is why I have the mage's card today, because he has the different elements right here that he's mastered. And so the magus represents Mercury, which is the intelligence. And and so yeah, basically we're just building the intelligence so that we can see the net of karma. And so whatever is born or dies, but we know that's a illusion, right? We're not really born, or we don't really die. But anything that has karma, or anything that has an atma, anything that has a chart like that, we can do a tarot reading on it. And then I even do tarot readings on events, or, in like a more Gyani, like scientific way, where I'll just like pull a card on something. But that's connected to my Atma, right? It's like, and then if you do like big tarot reading events for a whole event of like a collective consciousness, you're just basically reading the karma of the collective consciousness. So, but
That's
yeah,
so exciting, though. I mean, just it's like we're so accustomed to having words below a picture and large explanations, and um and just having the relational perceptions, visually for uh not only those types of learners, but those types of like sentient beings is so powerful. Whoops. I mean, it's just there's sort of like there's in the eight branches that you're speaking of with Ashtanga yoga. I mean, I know in the bhakti community I've heard it said like, well, bhakti is the topmost yoga, and the way that they say it is just as like almost like an iteration of what someone else passed on to them informationally, so you can tell that there's some sort of resistance in where there could be expansion on in their consciousness through this mean, because it's speaking. It's like the picture is speaking to them in so many ways from their previous exposure and previous experience. And so so being re-exposed to this in a harmonious way is helpful, especially for integration of communities on in that tree of life. If yeah, so and that way, you have like um words or west that are westernized. Like you use the word, I mean, literally it was written on there as magician, but you use the magis, you used it as a like almost like a maybe a Latin root, or used a root word, right? So that's like teaching us to not just read with our symbolic interaction mind, but to really listen better to the jiva to jiva, which answers my previous question about how you how you relate, jiva to jiva practically. So that's so wonderful. Thank
Hmm.
you, Raven.
You're welcome. Like I'm loving what I'm hearing. This makes so much sense to me too. Everything you're saying, I love it.
Yeah, I just I'm having a little bit of difficulty technologically with my battery power. So I just wanted to just take a little moment to just do a few adjustments.
No problem.
Um uh I just wanted to let guests know that we're recording Raven. Raven should be the only one spotlighted. Let me see. Okay, there we go. um but yeah, it's so lovely to have her on, to have Raven on here. Um and so um yeah, well, I think there'll be time even for guests to ask questions about what they've heard so far. Maybe this is an okay, it would that be agreeable amongst everyone? Does anyone have put any questions in the chat for Raven so far? We've done two questions and a bio pretty much.
Yeah, and I can speak more on what we talked about earlier too. Like I can go a little bit more into depth.
Oh, okay. So we want to talk a little bit more about sublimatorium. Not just saying, she's wondering more, and this doesn't have to relate directly to the podcast at all. I think it's just interesting. We could just take a moment to just speak about your fascinating research project, the sublimatorium. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Definitely. Thank you so much for like yeah, I really sublimatorium came to me as a project to unite. Basically it's everything that you like you're posing these questions. It's trying to make sense of the discord in matter. And when we look at matter, it's it has all these shadows, and so that's why it's an occultist page. But it's like basically the idea of sublimatorium is to just serve those who have been trying to remove the veil for a while. And it's a constant process because that's what occultism means. It's to remove the veil, take it on, like that. And the veil is really just our consciousness. It's like the third eye again. Like we're just trying to open that up so we can see what has been unintentionally hidden and intentionally hidden. And that is discernment. When you're just so sublimatorium is trying to unite the different forms of communities that have basically had schisms since the Renaissance. Because, during the Renaissance, that's whenever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. And that, I don't know if you realize that, but he basically appeared at the end of just like a lot of the schism where we got colonialism started branching off and discovering things. And I don't think if people were really citing their sources on where they got some of their wisdom. I just I'm here today with sublimatorium, and it's the idea of a sublimatorium. It's very mysterious. It's kind of like a vessel of where you're just going from, thy like life to death and being transformed. And so I think that's what I want to act as, just like a vessel to help people question. And I want to bring people from the science background who are more sort of, they might not believe in astrology, or they might not see the value of occultism, or even Vedic history, indigenous history, all these things which were here before science was invented. And it's an invention in of itself. And so we have to connect all the different cultures, because you have more cultures coming from, who were colonized by the folks who were using the term science as, and they were using the pontifices. I don't know if you ever heard of the early popes. They were the
Yeah.
reason why we have colonialization. They created these doctrines and told their conquistadors and all that. They told them to sail across the world and just take whatever and enslave them. And I have the names of the papal bulls, the Romanus Pontifex.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. And this is also on your other talk on your Instagram too, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
on Casa de Luz with Diadara. And and it's just like a humble little project, and I want it to grow. Right now like every like I get on there like every week, and like, a chemist has followed me or something, and I'm just like, yes, it's
Wow.
just uniting, just just showing people that we all exist on a spectrum. It's like
Yeah.
I come from like a postmodern queer school, and we use nati, we use disidentification to say, like, I am this body, I am these material identities, but I'm also kind of not. Like, I'm also something else. And so sublimatorium is to take that idea and to help unite, science community with the arts, and the witches with the rocket scientists, because
Yeah. Wow.
they don't realize it, but there's a history there that's connected to these things. And so I want them to know. Yeah. That's
Oh,
basically. Oh, and I'm gonna grow it. You know, I'm gonna grow it to open up for publishing. I want it to become a publishing house. I want to be a rare books dealer
uh-huh.
and become my own publishing house. I'm gonna be working on self-publishing books through there, podcasts, things like that. And I have a lot of editing experience in literature magazines and zines and stuff like that. So I really want to open it up to the community and have eventually just have people post their words on there, and more collaborations, helping all types of people publish their work and stuff.
That is so cool. It's just like I mean getting chemists or other people from around the world is the way to not just move traffic, and not just like move traffic on on the internet, but just to really grow as a species, and develop in our jivas, in our that's so cool. um yeah, uh I guess okay, so um I just want to like regroup a little bit and just go over any other questions from the audience
I saw a question in the
from
chat box.
in the chat box. Okay, let's check it out.
So what about my music? I definitely have some music coming out this year. I'm working on an EP, and it should be out. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Woo! Yeah, and Raven has a YouTube channel that we'll post this on later, probably, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
like
okay, this is good. I think I was gonna end the live stream on the YouTube and just have this be a taste, of the full interview. We're recording it, so we'll have the recording available. What do you think, Raven?
I love that. And to Nadia and anyone else out there, if you want to follow me on at Raven Reivin underscore Alexandria, like the Library of Alexandria, Raven underscore Alexandria on Instagram. That is where you can see me posting about my music and when things are going to be officially released and stuff like that. So as of right now, I'm posting a lot of videos where I'm incorporating music, but they're mainly around the pagan seasonal wheel, where I'm just sort of showing sketches of how I'm conceptualizing my rituals and music together. And yeah, so check that out. And also follow at Sublimatorium on Instagram.
Yeah, woo!
I kind of see it's like, my solar and my lunar, my Mars and my Venus. Like I go, my Capricorn and my Libra page. I call Sublimatorium my Capricorn page. And Raven Alexandria is my Libra page. But yeah, that's my chart. So
That's so open of you. Thank you.
yeah, I'm
So
very
hit
yeah.
that follow button, hit that subscribe button.
Thank you.
Let's go see that podcast Ahimsa and thank you YouTube. Okay. So let's see. I probably can't even stop recording knowing me. Like, oh, okay. Let's see.